So Janet, you want to update our listeners and viewers about what's going on at Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy? We just got done with another movement challenge, and you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, we just had our Mount Everest challenge, and I think that was 50 miles of walking, biking, swimming, any kind of exercise that we could accomplish. And we had a great turnout. Most of the clients that or people that signed up enjoyed themselves. I think that was the main goal of a challenge, is that we want people to just start moving, and it's at whatever level you are at. Because the body in motion stays in motion, and we believe that that leads to some longevity and quality of life, not just numbers, but quality. I think one of the things that I've tried to impress upon my children is that life is something we need to enjoy, and I think having these challenges does get us outside. And after being locked up under restrictions in the last year or so, I hope that that was achieved by most of the people that were involved in it. Sound like with the comments that was the case.
Yeah, and let's not forget, a body in motion tends to stay in motion, and a body not in motion tends to die. So let's not forget that part. So stay tuned for our next challenge. A few weeks ago now, we had Marty Kendall from Data Driven Fasting on our podcast, and he discussed data-driven fasting, which is kind of like intermittent fasting, but not necessarily, because everybody should fast differently. Just like everybody's exercise should be different, everybody's activity, everybody's diet should be different. So how we fast should be different. We can't all fast for 48 hours or 72 hours or 24 hours. It depends on many factors. It depends on our activity level. It depends on our bodies already. It depends on how much extra storage we already have on our bodies. So this data-driven fasting, we're going to do a challenge in July. I think it's July 16th or 17th, this challenge starts. And I'll give you more information as we update it at our pharmacy's webpage or Facebook page. And right here, of course, we'll update you at Health Solutions also. So what it is it's where you check your blood glucose. And as we know, food spikes our blood glucose. When our blood glucose gets lower, we should be hungrier. So it is a system to help to train your body when you should be feeling hungry and when you shouldn't be eating. Because your blood glucose is high, that means you have enough fuel in your blood, and extra glycogen also where you're producing glucose, and you shouldn't necessarily be hungry. So I'm super excited. I've already been doing it a little bit, and it's very, very good data to gather. You can really gather what happens after you eat, what happens before you eat, what happens when you wake up, what happens after you exercise. It's definitely given me some data that really surprised me. One thing that surprised me the most was that my glucoses are typically my glucoses are fairly consistent all the time. When I wake up, before I eat, and when I exercise too. Now, they run a little bit high, almost borderline diabetic. Now, let's realize, as we said in this show many, many times before, that labs are a tool to go along with symptoms and history. So my blood glucose does not spike very high when I eat, and my insulin levels are very low. So just because you have glucoses that run over 100, which mine typically are over 100, even 115, even 120, mine run when I wake up or after exercise, that does not necessarily mean you're a diabetic. My glucose, my insulin, my pancreas responds very, very well. My insulin levels are low. So there again, it's kind of like cholesterol. We've talked a lot about cholesterol on this show, and I've shared some of that in my social media, that my cholesterol and my total cholesterol and my LDL, the bad cholesterol, is both high. But that doesn't necessarily mean I need to go on drugs to lower my cholesterol. My triglycerides are low. My HDL is high, partly because triglycerides will lower when you exercise, and HDL is raised, which is a good cholesterol when you exercise. So there's just more to the story than lab numbers. That includes glucose also. So Janet, do you have any comments on that?
I do. So really what we're trying to achieve is just that we become more mindful of what we are putting in our bodies, because as Americans, I don't think we realize how food impacts us throughout the day. And if we have tools to use, it can be to our benefit as to how we want to proceed, how we want to eat, how we want to plan, and also just being honest to ourselves up front. Because I think once we start charting things and looking at things, then we have to be honest to ourselves. And I think it's just a tool. And like Shawn said, everybody's going to have different needs and different requirements. And that's the whole idea behind setting some of these challenges, is that we learn about ourselves, learn about our habits, learn about what we need to change, and we do that on an individual level. So, challenges are really to get us engaged. We're not looking for a gold medal. What we're looking for is people getting involved in their own health and taking responsibility for those things.
So I just got word that all the way across country, Dr. Pran is in the hospital in an emergency case with a patient. So he's a gastroenterologist, and we've had him on our show before. So I hope everything goes okay with his patient. I'm sure it will. He's an incredibly awesome doctor, and I'm super excited to have him on. He's a little bit non-traditional when it comes to doctors, and I think it should be more traditional, because being a gastroenterologist, he really stresses how important diet is to our bodies. And, if you go back to, I don't know what episode it was, but if you go to our YouTube site, the Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy YouTube site, and you go inside our videos and you search Dr. Pran, you'll get a lot of little videos from him about certain drugs that people are prescribed by a lot of gastroenterologists or primary care doctors that we might not need. Let's go into some of those. He talked about PPIs. PPIs are proton pump inhibitors. Popular names are Prilosec and Prevacid. Janet, what are they used for, and how long should we be on them, or should we ever be on them?
So the only time I feel it's necessary to be on those particular drugs is in a stressful situation and for a very short term, no longer than a month for sure. Because as we lower the stomach acid, then we lower our body's ability to actually digest food. And I will tell you, for all the years that I worked in pharmacy, getting a patient off of these medications, once they start them and they've been on them long term, it is almost as bad as taking them off street drugs, because your body becomes so dependent on that lowering of their acid that when they start eating regular food, they just are dying with reflux. And that's really not the intention of our stomach. Our stomach function requires our body to make acid to digest food on a normal basis. So we want to continue to do that. We don't want that stomach to not have its normal function. So short-term use is the only time that I like to see it, and very shortly to promote healing, to help prevent a stress ulcer or something like that. But that's the only time I would recommend it.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Our bodies are designed to have acid tummies, okay? The acid is there for a reason, like Janet said, to digest food, also to prevent bad stuff from growing. Bacteria or anything that's ingested that needs to be killed. Acid is really good for that. So our body should be acid, or our tummy should be acid, and absorption of nutrients, vitamin D, our minerals, calcium, magnesium. Think about what minerals are. Minerals are a very hard substance. They need something to help break them down, and acid is really good at dissolving minerals. Our bodies are made to be that way. So we do not need to be on long-term potent antacids to make our stomachs neutral. If we're having problems with reflux, GERD, any kind of gastroenteritis, it's probably diet related. Find out what you are eating that triggers it. Also, don't eat as much. Also, don't eat late at night. Our bodies, our gastrointestinal tract follows gravity, even though we have peristalsis and the motility and muscles in our body to help us move that food along, gravity still helps. So if you eat a big meal and you lay down, it possibly could come back up. I will tell you, 11 years ago now, when I lost 60 pounds, I had reflux. Every morning I would get up and I would have reflux when I was in the shower. And guess what? I guarantee you, if I would have went to a traditional doctor They wouldn't have said anything about my weight. They would have just put me on medication. And guess what? If I didn't lose weight 11 years later, I would still be on that medication, and probably many more because I'd have side effects from it. So change your diet. Diet is so important with many, many different diseases.
Well, there's other things that people can do to help. Besides, I mean, changing the food is the easiest thing to start with. And there's also things that are over the counter that can help too. Probiotics help with replacing the good bacteria in our GI all the way through our intestinal tract, as well as our upper GI too. There's probiotics. There's also enzymes. There's sometimes people are just having difficulty breaking things down. Maybe they had gallbladder surgery and they're having trouble with fat. So learning what the difference between what irritates your gut or what irritates you and eliminating those things are very helpful. It's free. Elimination's free. It's not like you're being charged a whole lot of money not to put something in your mouth. And also then you learn what triggers you have. And one of the things that we haven't talked about that we do talk about on our show too is that alcohol does irritate our stomach. It irritates the GI lining, and so that can be a possibility as well. So what we ingest as far as liquids and drinks it could be caffeine, too much coffee, too many foods that are high in caffeine. I mean, there's lots of different things out there. So, buyer beware and, like we said, eliminate. And being mindful of what you're ingesting too can make a big difference. And like Shawn said, timing. For some people, it could be just lowering the fat content to their food, or it could be just the acid content too, because some foods, some spicy foods, and the list goes on. So, just research, look,
and trial and error. If you eat something and it causes reflux, don't do that.
Right.
And let's talk about some other drugs too. Alcohol, caffeine, Janet mentioned, also nicotine. All those,
Right.
They change the lower esophageal sphincter pressure. So it makes it harder to keep food down. So nicotine, caffeine, and alcohol. If you're having GERD problems, get rid of those. You don't need a drug like a PPI, Prilosec, Prevacid. Change your diet, get rid of some drugs that are offending agents. There's also some over-the-counter drugs and prescription drugs that have side effects. I can think of some of the antihistamines and things like Benadryl for allergies, things like that are anticholinergic that also can affect that lower esophageal sphincter pressure. So make sure you know about those drugs or what you're taking. And if you guys have any questions, please feel free to give us a call and at Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy, and Janet and I can help you with that.
So another thought before you go on further is, as a nation, we drink a lot of soda. And anything that's carbonated is going to be, sometimes it can be helpful and sometimes it can be irritating. So, keep those things in mind.
That's correct. So today also, because Dr. Pran had an emergency, this is going to be our show to talk about anything and everything. And I want you guys, the listeners and the viewers, to ask us any kind of question. So put any kind of comment on Facebook. We're also streaming. No, we're only streaming live on Facebook right now. And because you know why we're not streaming live on YouTube? Because we've gotten censored a bunch of times and they threatened to take our account away. So we're not streaming live on YouTube, but stay tuned because we are looking at some other options. We are on Rumble also, but we don't stream live there yet. So, but you can also give us a call. You can chat with us, 509-537-0411. And our phone lines are open. So let's talk about some other diseases that are typically there's drugs prescribed and you might not need drugs. Let's talk about GI diseases since Dr. Pran was going to be on. Let's talk about IBS. Janet, what is IBS?
Well, irritable bowel syndrome is kind of a catch-all for a lot of different things out there. Basically, in my mind, it's an inflammatory process that's happening in the intestinal tract. And again, it probably is linked more to our activities. It could be stress, it could be food, it could be lack of sleep. A lot of different issues that can be let in there. It could be allergies. Lump it all into one. And my gut feeling is that over time, watching patients, that there's probably something in the lifestyle that is causing inflammation, and it can be something that we might be able to fix without putting people on medication.
That's exactly right. In fact, if you look up our episodes from prior our prior episode with Dr. Pran, and I suggest you do that. He talks about IBS, and he's a gastroenterologist, and he doesn't believe in the diagnosis at all. I'm thinking about irritable bowel syndrome. I mean, seriously, what is that?
Well,
It
it's a
sounds like
catch-all.
yeah, it's a catch-all. It's
Yeah.
like you're having gut issues. Well, if you're having gut issues, I would probably think that it has to do with your diet. You don't have a deficiency in some kind of drug, especially, some kind of drug that's going to cause any kind of side effects. Why would you want to do that? Change your diet.
Well, foods that are high in fat that we forget about are processed foods, like our fast foods are, really can put some pressure on how much bile we're creating, and that can give you issues too. And so, cutting out foods first before jumping on to the bandwagon of adding a drug that can have side effects is kind of what we're going with our talk, because you can eliminate something and figure out what's irritating you, then you might eliminate the whole problem.
Well, and let's face it, it's not just fat. I mean, we're not saying fat is bad. Those processed foods also have a lot of carbohydrates. Let's say what's bad is just overeating, and your body can't handle that much. So it's about portion control.
Or too much of one thing. I mean,
Correct.
if you're eating guacamole, which has good essential oils in it, or fish, a lot of times you're not having that bad feeling if you're going down that road of not producing enough bile. So the reason I'm throwing the fast food out there is because that's something Americans digest on a regular basis, and sometimes they are irritated by it. So
that's right. So speaking of moderation, Janet, one thing that you've always taught me, and you've taught our listeners and viewers, is you've always talked about moderation. That's kind of what you grew up learning. That's what your dad taught you. Will you talk about moderation when it comes to maybe just diet, but maybe other things too? What about moderation?
Well, we have on our show many people that have very varying views and what works for them or works for their clients or their patients. And on a professional level, I totally support that for them. Those doctors and practitioners out there that find what works for their client, I'm not knocking that. So just remember that. But I believe that God gave us fruits, vegetables, grains, and meat to eat. And that comes all the way back to the first book in the Bible in my brain. And my dad always said, it's not about not having something to eat, it's about how much you're having to eat and keeping it in moderate. So moderation. And I believe that can be very true in just trying to eliminate things that irritate us, or even just things that we enjoy to eat. If we're not eating the same thing every day and we're using seasonal foods and working those in, and not just having one item, I think that gets us to a point where we're going to have nutrients from different places and we're going to enjoy our food. I personally don't believe in eliminating all things from our diet unless they cause allergies or they bother us or cause inflammation. I believe all the food groups are there for our enjoyment. It's just like my dad said, in moderation. And he also believed that with alcohol too. It's if we overindulge in one specific thing, then even water, if we get too much water, we can kill ourselves.
Absolutely.
So we have to keep it in moderation, and that means not excess, and that can be different for each individual. Obviously, my husband can eat a bigger steak than I can, and that's just how we are different. And finding those places where it's healthy and healthy choices is what the goal would be.
Although I can tell you that my wife can eat more butter than I can. She grew up on a dairy farm, so she eats it by the
Right.
spoonful sometimes. I catch her doing that every once in a while.
Mhm.
It's funny. By the way, Janet, very, very good information there. You are super smart, and you are definitely making our goal of educating and empowering our consumers about their health. Super smart, super proud of you. There's a reason I married you, I can tell. Okay, so let's talk about some other things when it comes to diet. This one, I tell you, it's not only near and dear to my heart because I have family members and friends that have it, but we have so mistreated it in our healthcare system. It just fires me up, and that is diabetes. And I'm talking type 2 and type 1 diabetes. So what is the difference? I've been ostracized on social media before, and people say I don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to type 1 diabetes, because they say that, you know, I don't know what I'm talking about because I say they have to watch their diet and it's an insulin, they don't make enough insulin. And I get that. Believe me, I'm a pharmacist. I think I know diabetes pretty well. Okay. And the difference between type 1 and type 2 is this. Type 1, years ago when we learned about diabetes, when I learned about it in pharmacy school, and before that, it was kind of changing when I was in pharmacy school in the mid 90s, early 90s. We used to call it juvenile onset and adult onset diabetes. And don't quote me on these numbers, but they're just kind of all relative anyway. And it's just kind of to get a picture in your head. 50 years ago, 90% of all diabetics were juvenile onset. That's also what we know as type 1 diabetes. And that is where their pancreas does not make enough insulin. We kind of figured that out in the 1920s, actually, and that's where we pioneered using insulin to save these kids' lives. We used pork and beef insulin to save their lives. We use insulin from the pancreases of beef, cows and pigs, and it worked wonderfully. And you can see these before and after picture of these kids, because insulin is anabolic, i.e., it takes glucose out of the body, out of the bloodstream, into the tissue. And if you can't do that, you will literally just waste away. So these kids would not be able to gain any kind of weight, and they'd be super skinny, and they're just atrophying. Give them insulin. Next thing you know, a few months later, they're just growing like normal. So that's what insulin does. It takes blood glucose out of the body, or out of the bloodstream into to be absorbed in the tissues. Okay. And type 1 diabetics, they don't make enough insulin. Type 2 diabetics make a lot of insulin, enough insulin, they're just resistant to it. So now 80% of all diabetics are adult onset. That's an old term. They're type 2. So, it's not, the reason we changed the term from adult onset to type 2 is because now, unfortunately, we've got kids that have type 2 diabetes. Why? Because they eat like crap and they don't move. So they are insulin resistant, i.e., their pancreases are making enough insulin, but their body does not respond to it. They're resistant to it. So they got to keep making more and more and more, or to bring their glucoses down, or they've got to do inject exogenous insulin. So I am going to tell you right now, when it comes to type 2 diabetes, this is a strong statement. I get it. It's a very powerful statement, and it's coming from a pharmacist. I do not believe in medication to treat type 2 diabetes, period. There might be some specific instances where they have a little bit of type 1 diabetes in there that I might make exceptions, but let's face it, type 1 or type 2 diabetes mellitus literally means honey siphon. It literally means that you are peeing out sugar. That's what it means in Greek, diabetes mellitus. So your blood glucose is too high and you'll start spilling sugar into your urine, whether it's type 1 or type 2. How do you lower your blood sugar? Well, with type 1, you can give them insulin. With type 2, if your insulin's too high, how do you lower your blood sugar? Stop eating, right? Especially carbohydrates. You can lower your blood sugar by not eating carbohydrates. Stay tuned for our challenge, our data-driven fasting challenge in July through our pharmacy, Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy, because we will have a challenge where you'll be checking your blood glucoses in this challenge, and you will know what your blood sugar is, and you will know how it responds to eating, and you may or may not be surprised. I was surprised. I can rationalize a lot of the stuff now, and I like gathering the data, but I was a little bit surprised, and it is nice to know. So stay tuned for that. So if you're type 1 diabetic, you need insulin exogenously. I get that. If you're type 2 diabetic, how do you lower your blood sugar? You've already got enough insulin. So how do you lower your blood sugar? Well, there's two ways. One way to lower your blood sugar is stop eating carbohydrates or stop eating, period. And the second way is to exercise. Move. Why is your blood sugar high? Why do we have blood sugar? Our blood glucose is a primary mechanism. I know the people that are all keto, they're going to argue with me on that, but still, we always have blood sugar floating around our bodies. We do. If you don't have blood sugar, you will die. So we use glucose. Also, we call it blood sugar, but it's actually glucose as fuel. We use it as fuel. So if your blood sugar is high, you can exercise and it will bring your blood sugar down. All right. So type 1, type 2 diabetes, they are both carbohydrate metabolism problems. Period. Yes, they are treated different and they manifest differently. Both of them are carbohydrate metabolism problems. Whether you are type 1, let's go backwards with that. Whether you're a type 2 or a type 1 diabetic, you should watch the carbs you eat. Now, traditionally, what do we do in the traditional healthcare system, especially with kids with type 1 diabetes? My nephew is a type 1 diabetic, and I warned my brother that this was going to happen when he was diagnosed with diabetes and he was in the ICU. Don't worry about what you eat. You can just turn up your insulin pump. No, that's not good recommendation at all. You need to worry about what you eat. That same dietitian also said that, well, we don't want to deny diabetics their cake. We don't want to deny kids their cake or their candy, so we give them more insulin. Well, let me just tell you right now, I'm just not going to pussyfoot around it anymore, okay? I just want to be honest. If we don't deny diabetics their cake and their candy, we'll deny them of their eyesight and their kidneys and their feet. Have you seen diabetics that had their feet cut off because they have poor circulation? Yeah. So if you're diabetic and you're not watching your diet and you don't care about your glucose, that's what's going to happen. Medication is not the answer. You have to change your diet. My brother shared a story this weekend. He was down in, I think it's called South Padre Island, south of San Antonio, I think. And he showed me a picture of 3 people in the pool. And do you remember, 40 years ago, obviously some of you won't, but 40 years ago, when I used to go to the pool as a kid, there might be one fat kid in the pool, but there weren't that many. Now you go to the pool and all the kids are fat. I mean, they're on their way to type 2 diabetes. So my brother Shane, he sends me this picture of this guy that he's in the pool and he's morbidly obese, over 100 pounds overweight, and he's set up. I mean, his doctor's got him set up. He's got a continuous glucose monitor. I mean, he's rocking it. He's doing great while he's sitting there in his lazy chair feeding his face full of junk. But he's got it all figured out. He's got a glucose monitor. So I am not trying to beat up on diabetics at all. I'm really not. I just want to be honest with them. I want to be honest so they know the truth. If you don't watch your diet, if you don't control your diet, you will end up being blind, having no kidneys, and no feet. So I like to tell everybody that diabetes is a carbohydrate metabolism problem. You must watch your diet, period. And if you have any questions on that, you can always call us at the pharmacy, 509-764-2314. Janet and I can walk you through some steps on to how to change your diet, how to change your lifestyle. Because, we're not traditional pharmacists. We really aren't. First of all, our pharmacy is a compounding pharmacy. And if you know our story a little bit, you know that we kind of changed our model a few years ago, almost 20 now, when we decided that we did not want to. We thought, giving people medications to treat these diseases that are diet and lifestyle related is just enabling them. We want to educate and empower consumers that they're in charge of their own health. And that's what we did. And we are so passionate about it. And that's what our goal is. It's not very common for a pharmacist to try to get diabetics off of medications or to try to get anybody off any kind of medication, but that's kind of our goal. We believe in health and wellness long term. So diet, exercise, and of course, we do compound a lot of customized hormone replacement. And hormone replacement, I believe, is a good tool to go along as we age, to go along with lifestyle type changes. Let's talk about that. Many diseases that women and men get can be prevented if their hormones are properly balanced. Let's talk about women, for instance, or men. Osteoporosis. How many people out there on medications for osteoporosis? Well, why were their bones just fine when they're 35? Is it because our bones just start getting weaker and weaker? Is it because we're not eating enough calcium? Is it because we don't have enough vitamin D? Both those play a part. There's no doubt about it. But think about it. What happens as we age? Our hormone levels decline. So as we age, our hormone levels decline. Estrogen, we know, decreases bone breakdown. It decreases osteoblast function. I'm sorry, it decreases osteoclast function, which breaks down bone. It doesn't build new bone, though. What hormones do build new bone? Progesterone and testosterone. Testosterone increases osteoblasts, which help to build new bone. Think about this. Men get osteoporosis also. Absolutely, they do. But when do they get it? They usually get it later in life. Is it due to lack of estrogen? No, it's not due to lack of estrogen. It's due to lack of testosterone. So you want to prevent osteoporosis? You don't need some drug like Fosamax to treat it or prevent it. You need to have your hormones balanced. And testosterone, there is no better bone building drug than testosterone, period. So don't forget about that. Many other benefits too, heart health. Unlike what you hear in the media about testosterone causing heart attacks, think about that. Let's just use a good analogy with, I don't even like to call myself a scientist. I'm just trying to be rational. And when I heard about testosterone causing heart attacks, and there's a black box warning on some of the testosterone therapies from the FDA because it caused heart attacks, it didn't make sense to me. And think about this: as men, when is our testosterone the highest? When we're like 19, right? Okay, well, 19-year-olds aren't dropping like flies from heart attacks. So the thought that testosterone is causing heart attacks doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Now, and just remember this: association does not prove causation. So that's a whole other topic. We've actually got a lot of information on that. If you go to our YouTube site, the Mosaic Professional Pharmacy YouTube site, we have a lot of videos on testosterone. Type in testosterone, you will get more information than you've ever wanted on testosterone. So that's one of the reasons we do this. All right. So what are some other drugs that hormones can prevent you from being on? We talked about osteoporosis. It can prevent. Let's talk about women. Our most popular medication is called estriol vaginal cream. It's just an estrogen vaginal cream. I prefer estriol because it's more specific to vaginal tissue than some of the commercially available products, and it doesn't cause proliferation of tissue like estradiol does. And of course, Premarin. Another option would be Premarin vaginal cream. If you guys don't know where Premarin comes from, I'm going to tell you. Premarin stands for pregnant mare's urine. Yep, that's what it is. It's horse pee. I would never recommend it to anybody. We've got a lot of options besides Premarin. I don't think Premarin should ever be prescribed. Speaking of beef and pork insulin, when we were talking about that, we don't use beef and pork insulin anymore because we have human insulin. Why should we use Premarin? If you're on Premarin, give us a call. We can give you some options. Please. Thank you. Estriol vaginal cream. What does it help? Atrophic vaginitis, vaginal dryness. As we age, the vaginal tissue can get dry because of lack of estrogen. Estrogen can help that. But also, what else can it help? Prevention of urinary tract infections. How many, older women have urinary tract infections? They never had it when they were in their 30s. So now all of a sudden they need chronic antibiotics? No, they need estrogen vaginal cream. Use it a couple times a week. They'll never have UTIs again. All right, never is a strong word, but they'll have a lot less frequent ones. Also, urinary incontinence. How many women as they age have problems with their bladder? Well, they don't lack a drug. They lack estrogen. You give them estrogen either topically or orally systemically, and a lot of times those symptoms will go away. So as always, we're taking callers anytime. So 509-537-0411, taking callers. And I just like to answer your questions. So please comment on Facebook, and we can take any of your questions. You can always catch us 12:30 to 1:30 every Monday, Pacific Standard Time, on my personal Facebook page and the Mosaic Professional Pharmacy page. Also on all the podcast forums, so Google Play, iTunes, all your favorite podcast forums, iHeartRadio, all those. And we're adding them all the time. So, we just added Rumble a few weeks ago. I'm looking at some other options. I just did my first TikTok video yesterday. So check out my TikTok account. And speaking of that also, so we would love you to follow me on Twitter, Shawn Needham on Twitter. I have a LinkedIn page also, and of course my Instagram. My Instagram is Health Solutions of Shawn Needham. I'd love for you to follow me there. We're really trying to grow our social media so we can just reach more people, and in doing so, just educate and empower others that they are in charge of their own health care. So it looks like we're about winding up today's show. I missed Dr. Pran today, but we will reschedule him. I hope everything's going okay with his patient again. And Dr. Pran, we missed you. Thursday, let's see, 8 to 9 a.m. We have Brian Westlake on. He's a physical therapist. He's on the East Coast, and he has a physical therapy practice. He's going to be telling us about some of his special modalities. And here's another thing. He is a cash-only physical therapist. Why is he a cash-only physical therapist? Which means he doesn't take insurance? Well, because he, like in our pharmacy at Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy, we believe that all insurance does is makes things more expensive, decreases quality, and decreases service. Period. That I can prove that over and over and over again. When we deal directly with a consumer in healthcare without an insurance company involved, the service is going to be better, the quality is going to be higher, and the price is going to be lower, period. We talked about it many times on this show. I wrote a book about it. It's all about free market solutions. It's all about you making the decision to take charge of your own health, and that includes financial. And we show you some ways how to do that. So, Sickened, how the government ruined healthcare and how to fix it. Stay tuned. Tune in Thursday with Brian Westlake, physical therapist, and you don't want to miss that episode. And today's been a great episode. Thank you for listening. Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham.